Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Jasmine Lee. Since taking office, President Trump has signed a series of executive orders, including plans to expand coal mining and coal-fired power generation. His reciprocal tariffs have also affected the clean energy sector. In his proposed 2026 budget, Trump calls for cutting $15 billion in green energy and carbon capture subsidies and eliminating $6 billion in funding for electric vehicle charging stations. What impact could these policies have on the future direction of the global energy industry? Join us today is Peter Kurz, Alpha Ring Asia Chairman. Mr. Peter Kurz is also known as Mr. Taiwan, is a foreign investment analyst. He's here today to discuss the latest developments in the global energy sector. A very warm welcome to you, Peter.
Thank you, Jasmine.
With the rise of natural gas and renewable energy, the share of coal-fired power generation in the U.S. has decreased from 50% to below 20%. Now Trump is seeking to revitalize the coal industry, ordering retired coal plants to operate at full capacity and continue generating power while loosening environmental regulations on coal. So Peter, what's your take on this energy policy shift, and how might this policy influence the global shift towards the green energy?
Well, let's remember that Donald Trump in his first administration also favored coal.
Yes.
And yet during that time period, as you mentioned just now, the use of coal declined. In fact, it declined about 35% during that first term, and has fallen further ever since then. So this is nothing that policies can change. This is nothing that a stated sort of view can change. The fact of the matter is that coal is becoming less commercially viable, less popular, and less mined as well. You have to start from the beginning, where you have to, if you want to expand coal production, you need to expand the amount of mines, which takes multiple years and substantial investment, which may not pay off. So I'm not concerned about coal responding to this policy announcement, though some of the cutback in the green energy subsidies and incentives that you mentioned will have an impact for sure. That said, the demand and the return on the investment in renewables has also been declining, all by itself, without the change in policies. And so this is really not changing the reality that we are facing today.
How about the impacts to Taiwan? Because will Taiwan be seeing more like pricier or more expensive like green energy products in Taiwan?
Well, I mean, Taiwan's more a user than a manufacturer of green energy products. Most of the green energy production market has been taken over by China. And so the impact to Taiwan will again be how quickly, how extensively we continue to implement green energy, renewable energy as the basis of our power source here. But that has been growing quite quickly nonetheless. It's currently about 12% of total Taiwan energy production, and there will be limits to how that can expand further. Renewable energy and solar, in particular wind, are very real estate intensive energy sources, and Taiwan, of course, has limited real estate, flat land that can be used here. So that might be a factor that slows that expansion.
And in the past months, and I believe in the following months, people were all talking about the reciprocal tariffs from Trump. So what is the impact of the Trump's reciprocal tariffs on renewable energy? And China, we know that China has strategically, you also mentioned that, developing its renewable energy sector and positioning itself as a world leader on that. So how might President Trump's approach impact the U.S. role in the global clean energy landscape?
Again, I think it will clearly, and this more than the incentives domestically in the U.S., will have the biggest impact on slowing the expansion of solar power in particular in the U.S., which of course, again, mostly comes from the China market. That said, again, you can argue that to some extent you can only rely so much on solar power as the source of your entire grid electricity power production, because it is so volatile. You need to have a large base load to support all of that too. So again, it will have an impact, but probably not changing the overall trend significantly.
I see. And Peter, we know that you just take on the role of chairman of Taiwan's only nuclear fusion development company. Could you walk us through what nuclear fusion technology is and why it matters?
Okay. Well, let me start off by saying what nuclear fusion isn't. Okay. It isn't nuclear fission. And many people make that confusion, so I'll explain it a little bit here. So obviously nuclear fission is splitting atoms, uranium primarily, so it relies on a chain reaction to keep that production of electricity or power energy production going. Nuclear fission results in nuclear waste after that process is done. Nuclear fusion is none of that. Nuclear fusion is, of course, fusing primarily hydrogen atoms together and releasing energy that way. Nuclear fusion requires energy input, so it's not a chain reaction. There's no risk, therefore, of overheating, of runaway nuclear meltdown, not at all with fusion. In fact, in the case of fusion, you are requiring an energy input to create the fusion reaction, and therefore, once you cut that energy input, the fusion reaction stops immediately. And again, there is no nuclear waste issue to worry about. And on top of that, ounce for ounce, nuclear fusion generates about 4 times as much energy as nuclear fission does as well. So it's clean, it's more energy efficient, and ultimately it should be certainly very safe and probably very cheap as well.
Let me confirm one thing here. So a lot of companies, they are requesting 100% renewable energy. So is nuclear fusion technology one of the renewable energy?
Depending on how expansive you want to apply that definition, certainly the primary input into nuclear fusion is hydrogen or different isotopes of hydrogen, or in the case of my company, hydrogen and boron. These are all some of the most common elements in the world, and they're everywhere in every country. And so from that standpoint, you can say it's renewable, you can certainly say it's limitless.
And we know that nuclear fusion technology has been developing for over 50 years. In the past, European country and the US and China has invested billions of dollars into this technology. And why did these regions consider this technology so promising and at such an early stage?
Well, nuclear fusion, as we like to say, is the energy of the sun and the stars. In fact, if you look at the entire universe, about 99.9, I don't know how many nines after that, of all energy produced is fusion energy. And so it's the ultimate energy source. And thus, if you can harness this, you have the most efficient source of power, because everything else we have, whether it's solar energy, whether it's fossil fuels, are all conversion of solar energy over time. And as I said, the fuel for this energy source is limitless here on Earth. So it would virtually solve all of our energy problems. And again, it's safe, it's clean, and it's limitless. What we've seen over the last 50 years, though, is that with all that potential that it offers, it's very difficult to actually put into practice here on Earth. What we have been able to do, though, over time is gradually, first of all, create fusion reactions in the lab. We can certainly do it in theory, and yet to actually put it into practice has been a very long process. But we are at a tipping point now where we see that a lot of the scientific theories that have been developed around that around nuclear fusion have been proven to be more or less correct now, and we're beginning to move into what we call the engineering stage of actually putting it into action into actual reactors. And there have been a number of successes. In the U.S., the NIF facility has already generated quite significant what we call Q value, in other words, more energy output than input, although for very short periods of time. We've seen success out of China, out of Europe as well. So that's been sort of the first transition from the science to the engineering challenges. And once you go into engineering space, then it just becomes a matter of time of overcoming one problem after the other. Second transition is we have seen the industry going from government-based projects to private sector. And that was a particular tipping point just in the last 5 years or so. We've seen now there are probably 50, if not 60, both government and private companies pursuing nuclear fusion now. And with that number of companies, you have many different approaches, technologies, and investment capital behind it that is pushing that envelope even further. The part of that process, too, has been going from very large units to much smaller units as well. The private sector tends to focus on smaller units. But the advantage of smaller units is that the initial investment cost is smaller, but the operating cost is smaller, too. Where that's interesting is that when we do the engineering process, though, you need to do a series of experiments. Each experiment is cheaper and faster than with the much larger, typically the tokamak projects.
And it's also more friendly to customers.
Well, ultimately, it will be easier to implement as well. But the point I want to make is that you can do many more assays on your development process much faster, and so you push that development process along much faster as well. So the fact is that as we progress, we're getting closer to the end at a faster pace as well.
So we're probably going to see more positive news in this technology. And Peter, you used to focus on Taiwan's semiconductor industry. So what sparks your interest in Taiwan's potential in this new energy, this advanced materials and energy storage? What makes you have the interest on this?
That's a really good question, and it's really good because, in fact, there's a lot of tie-ins from the semiconductor industry to nuclear fusion. In particular, both use plasma engineering issues and plasma physics. And so there's a lot of know-how here in Taiwan that we can tap into. Both require deep knowledge of specialty materials as well. And both require facility and precision equipment. And so we are able to tap into a lot of that technology, a lot of that talent here in Taiwan to help allow us to overcome these engineering problems. The way we're set up is a lot of the science is being done in the U.S., but the engineering issues are tackled here. And this has proven to be a real advantage that we've been able to, again, tap into.
And let's continue to focus on Taiwan. So Taiwan President Lai Ching-te, he announced plans to expand procurement of oil, natural gas, and other products from the U.S. to reduce the trade deficit with U.S. And the U.S. is already the third largest source of Taiwan's natural gas imports. And now with the expanded procurement from the U.S., Taiwan CPC Corporation, the state-owned oil and gas company, has signed a letter of intent for the purchases and the investment of Alaskan liquefied natural gas, and this will lead to future procurement of Alaskan LNG. So what impact do you think, as we are talking about Taiwan's energy policy, so what impact do you think this will have on Taiwan's broader energy policy landscape?
Well, again, Taiwan does need to shift its energy mix away from coal, and certainly natural gas is a much cleaner source of energy, at least from a pollutant emission standpoint. And so this is certainly a very positive development. And certainly it makes sense from Taiwan's standpoint to import more U.S. LNG because we need to reduce our U.S.'s trade deficit, our trade surplus. And that's certainly the fastest, easiest way of doing that. The problem is twofold, though. Natural gas is uniquely difficult to transport, but also to store. And so we need to build more storage terminals here, which take many, many years to get through the approval process.
Probably will be very controversial.
And will be controversial for sure. The second risk is that because of that limited storage capacity, to the extent that we increase our reliance on LNG, that means LNG tankers coming in over the ocean, we take on some geopolitical risk where we become vulnerable from blockades. Exactly. So these are two issues that we need to consider.
And do you think there's a way to resolve that with our allies, potentially with U.S. or Japan?
Well, that's a question beyond my pay grade, but look, you can see what China is doing to the Philippines in the South China Sea, and they have effectively pushed the Philippines merchant marine and naval forces out of that area by using their Coast Guard ships, not their naval vessels, which means it doesn't justify an allied or an American intervention. And so they could apply that same approach to Taiwan, and it may have some effect up until some point anyway.
And coming back to the procurement of the LNG from U.S., because this procurement strategy aimed to address Taiwan's trade surplus with the U.S., so how do you think the Trump administration would receive it?
Well, look, I mean, as I said, that's the one single item that Taiwan can purchase that will have a dent on that trade surplus that we have. But the problem is that China made the same promise in the first Trump administration and never followed up on it. So, as I said, promises are easy, implementation is more difficult. And with LNG, again, there's a lot of infrastructure spending that needs to be done before that as well. So it's a good starting point, but if we really want to resolve that trade surplus, we need to look at a greater integration between the U.S. and Taiwan economy. Obviously, semiconductors is the
TSMC.
Exactly the biggest element to all of that.
And you're also an expert in investment markets. So how would you assess the resilience of Taiwan's industries as they face this challenges of the current market turbulence?
So Taiwan, as we all know, is an economy of small businesses.
Yes.
And this is, I think, the core of its resilience, its ability to, at the margin, respond to changes in demand or changes in the economic or even political environment. So when suddenly there was this move to reduce reliance on the China economy as a source of exports and a foundation for manufacturing, the Taiwanese, who were very much invested in the Chinese economy and in China itself, were very flexible in moving that out to Southeast Asia, India, back to Taiwan. And so it's that flexibility and that, as I said, that sort of this sort of microeconomy that is operating more or less on its own that is able to respond much more quickly than perhaps larger economies like Korea or Japan.
Yeah, because we're also seeing that after the TSMC announced to invest more in the U.S., our supply chain also, it's moving their hubs and their fabs and their facilities to the U.S. So we're seeing that flexibility. And what other industry do you think worth special attention in the following years?
Well, I mean, other industries that I'm looking at that are similar in that they are new technologies and new industries that show considerable promise. One area I'm looking at is quantum computing, which I know many think is 30 years away, but many think fusion is 30 years away. And as I said, I think it's becoming more of a present-day reality. The thing about quantum computing is that it's very well applied to scenario analysis. It can't do everything that a classical computer can do, but it does scenario analysis very well. In other words, you try to find out what different factors might have different types of results. When combined, you can do that in almost unlimited numbers with quantum computing. If you combine that with AI, you're able to interpret those results much more quickly as well. So AI is very good at sort of interpreting existing data, but not doing projections on these scenario analyses. But it's, as I said, if you use that AI to interpret those scenario analyses, then you have suddenly a very powerful combined group of technologies. These companies have actually been doing, their share prices have been doing quite well in the US. So that's certainly one industry I think that could be of interest, and something, again, given Taiwan's strength in computing, may be able to tap into in the future. The second is SMRs, these small modular reactors. These are now fission reactors primarily. But what I find interesting about them is there is a lot of opportunity for applying fusion, fission, hybrid technology. So by doing that, you actually reduce the sort of physical component of the feedstock in the fission reactor. And so you're operating at what we call subcriticality. In other words, below that point where you have a chain reaction. So you're able to use sort of more traditional nuclear technology, but without the risk of a chain reaction creating a potential overheat or potential meltdown. You're using lower grade fuel, so it's going to be a lot cheaper. And you're using the fusion reaction to spark that fission reaction. So this is a way of allowing fusion to have an earlier impact in generating electricity, and yet creating a safer means of using this already more mature fission technology as well. I think that offers a lot of promise.
So you mentioned about quantum computer and the SMR. And so I think it also taps a little bit onto like building the resilience of Taiwan. So that will help Taiwan with the threat we're seeing right now, making Taiwan more resilient. So do you think that's the trait of Taiwan's industry or Taiwan's market, that we can do better in the technology that can help build resilience?
Well, it's a very interesting question, Jasmine, because obviously Taiwan is every day facing this sort of resilience challenge. And as I said, has done so very well in this highly sort of responsive structure of the economy. And again, these do tap into, certainly from the quantum computing standpoint, industries and areas where Taiwan has shown tremendous expertise in the past. So while I don't see much evidence of that taking place now, typically it's the case that the U.S. is often the starting point of these new technologies, but Taiwan is very quick in taking them on and commercializing them, scaling them up, bringing them down to a more viable price point, and applying them in their own economy as well.
And I think when we talk about Taiwan's industry, everybody will put their focus on TSMC. So with your prior expertise in semiconductor technology investment, what are your thoughts on TSMC's increased investment in the U.S.? And it says it's going to invest $100 billion in the U.S. and bring more fabs into Arizona. And what is your take on this?
Well, obviously it's a very controversial issue, and yet I think to the extent that TSMC is able to expand its production into the United States, it creates a certain degree of stability for the company itself, in the sense both that the U.S. is more willing to rely on it as its sole source of the very high-end chip manufacturing capacity, and in the sense that Taiwan obviously has some risk associated with it, whether it's the tectonic risk or the geopolitical risk. It does make sense for the company, for its shareholders, and for its entire ecosystem to have that diversity of geographic manufacturing bases. And certainly to the extent that they expanded to Japan, Europe, and elsewhere, it furthers that positioning of TSMC as a global leader, one that all countries, all customers can feel comfortable in relying solely on it. So from that standpoint, I think it's a good thing. The second element, too, is that as TSMC does that global expansion, as you mentioned earlier, they need to take their ecosystem, their supply chain with them, their service providers, to ensure that they're able to ramp up and maintain these facilities as operationally efficient as possible. And by so doing, they are, again, raising the game of all these companies, internationalizing them, and allowing them to be globally dominant as well. So while does mean that from a job standpoint, some of these jobs are being moved overseas, the fact is that we are making these companies far more resilient, far more important, and far more
global supply chain.
Right, far more established as global leaders. And from the job standpoint, quite frankly, Taiwan is not doesn't have a high unemployment problem. In fact, it's the other way around. We find a lot of up and coming companies finding difficulty finding technology or semiconductor or computing engineers to join their companies because they're all going into TSMC or that supply chain. So this could help broaden out the economy here in Taiwan.
Thank you for your great insights.
Thank you very much, Jasmine.
If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up, and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.